Okay, Matt? Go for it. What do you got going on?
So white mulberry tree. It's done. You don't see any white mulberries because the season's over. I don't know. Was this here the last time you were here?
I think it was, but I think it was buried in wire mesh with maybe wood chips or leaves or something in it. It was a lot shorter.
So yeah, they grow pretty fast. I don't know. No, that was the fig tree that was over there.
Oh,
So it
okay.
may not have even been here. So it's probably been here only 3 years. And it's one of my favorite fruits. It's different than the black mulberry tree, which you've seen before. And they're just like honey drops. They're actually pretty amazing. So they just kind of melt in your mouth. Leaves, again, like the black mulberry tree, quite edible. If you're blending a smoothie or something, they make things creamy. They're 10 times as nutritious as cabbage. So, and it'll grow 10 to 15 feet a year. So I have to keep it pruned if I don't want it 100 feet tall. That's how they grow. So it takes management, maybe 10 hours per tree of pruning a year, something like that. I just gave it a heavy prune here because there was some places that were getting a little out of reach for me. So I just took off some bigger branches, and if you want to leave some branches because that's where it soaks up the energy for next season's fruit. So if I pruned it all back right now, then next season's fruit wouldn't be very good. It wouldn't be very sweet because it can't put that energy into the root in the winter. And then I find that pruning in the spring before growth, that gives me the best fruit because all the fruit on a mulberry tree pretty much grows from first year's growth. It's different than like a peach tree that grows on second year's growth. Cherry trees too. So
How are you gonna keep it about that height?
So this is the height that I keep it at. These here are coming off. Everything that's straight up here, anything that's out of reach, I don't want, because I like to be able to walk under my tree and eat the fruit. It doesn't make sense to have to climb a ladder to pick fruit. I mean, I don't need 100 pounds of mulberries off of one tree. I've got other things going on. So if you want more, plant more trees. If you only had a small place, you probably shouldn't plant a mulberry tree. That's just kind of how it is. So, but if you have a larger place, you could plant more than one.
Is this just one tree?
This is just one tree.
So that's how it grows up from the ground is.
Nothing does anything. One thing that people don't really understand is when you set up a tree, you need to build its structure. The more branches for a mulberry tree you have coming out of the ground, the more stalks you have, the more places you have to hang fruit. So you essentially prune it off at the ground and it branches out, and you guide it for a few years until you get as many as you want. Then you have a big structure, and then you have more choices. My parents grew a mulberry tree. They didn't want to cut it down like I did, and so they have a single stalk coming up, and then they've got branches coming off of the side of it. And I mean, it's okay, but it's kind of nice in here. You can get inside of it if you want to. So it just makes it a wider tree. It just depends on how much space you have. I mean, there's different mulberry trees. We have a mulberry bush. I haven't planted it yet. But so there's many different varieties of everything. It's just, what do you want?
It looks good.
So I mean, there's Persian mulberries that are this long. So I don't have one of those. I have a seedling mulberry from my neighbor over there. Her trees are about 100 feet tall and 100 years old, and they're that big around at the base. So, I mean, they do get big. They could be as big as bigger than these maple trees. So, some multi-graft pear tree. It was here when you were here last time. So I don't really like multi-grafts just because it doesn't give me freedom. Like if I prune something off, I don't have it. So I wouldn't buy another multi-graft. But you know, it's a dwarf fruit stock, and it's taken quite a few years to even get this much growth on it. It's just been a really slow grower. And I have trees that are only, say, 3 years old, maybe 2 to 3 years old, that are 3 times as big. They're not producing as much fruit, but that's just kind of the way it is. We don't have a pollinator for this. This is an autumn olive. It produces blossoms every year, but we don't get any fruit, so either we'll take it out or we'll get a pollinator for it. I don't know what they taste like because I haven't had any fruit. Hawthorn tree, good for the heart. The leaves taste sweet and gives you energy. And actually, there's a friend of mine that has some heart troubles, and he uses it, and he notices if he takes too much of it, it actually makes his heart pound more than he wants it to. I haven't personally noticed that. I just noticed that it gives me energy. And it's a natural food. I can save the leaves, dry them for fall. I can blend them into smoothies and stuff. And tasty.
And are those berries on
This is a berry.
Those are edible, right?
These are edible. Yeah, they taste like, say, a mushy apple that's kind of sweet. They're called haws, so that's why it's called hawthorn. And they have little hard seeds in it that'll break your teeth. So.
Or are they...
No, they're fall. They're like apples, something like that. And the reason why this doesn't produce so many fruits is because I use it for leaves. I essentially prune it down and it grows back. I didn't have time to harvest it last year, so this is last season. I had cut it right here, and this is 1 season's worth of growth and a half. So they make really good hardwood if you need, like the Indians used to use the wood for like tools and things, because it's definitely good hard grain wood. It's strong, it doesn't break, it's flexible. This is a plum tree. They're just about ripe. And again, I like to keep my trees a little bit shorter. I missed a few branches. And it keeps on growing. So, Oregon grapes are edible. They kind of taste like lemonade if you blend them slowly. But it makes a purple, dark lemonade. The roots are used as an antibiotic. You yank them up and it's yellow, and you scrape off the bark, and then you can put it in like olive oil, and that really bright yellow comes out into the olive oil.
The bark or the inside?
The inside of the bark. I don't know if they call it the cambium layer, something like that. Yep. And over here, just finally got my trellis finished after a year and a half. These are racks that we used to use on the semi trucks for the bees to hold everything down, so they're 8 foot long, as wide as a semi-truck bed. And so I just repurposed them, and these are hardy kiwis. So we had them planted over there, and they just started to produce fruit, and we had to dig them up and cut all the roots off. We moved them over here, and so it's been 2 more years, and this one here is just barely thinking about producing some fruit. You can see little tiny hardy kiwis here.
So those will get bigger, or?
Well, this is my first year. I'll tell you next year. So I don't think they get much bigger, because it's just they make a bunch of little fruits. They are kiwi that will grow in our locale.
And you have like 2 females and a male?
This is a male, and we have 4 females. And apple trees showed up since you were here last. We have a Liberty and a Freedom. Haven't tasted them. This is the first year that they've actually produced fruit. And still trying to keep my trees short. They, you know, they haven't really set enough fruit to bend the branches down like Paul's have bent down. And I don't know that I'm going to end up having the structure that Paul does. It's a whole different, I mean, Paul lives in the Garden of Eden. We don't live in the Garden of Eden. You know, he's sub-irrigated and we're not.
No, I think if when these get a little bit bigger, we might drop these some. I have one apple tree, or I have an apple tree that one of the branches produced fruit last year, and that branch is just bending down, and then the other ones are kind of, you know, doing their own thing. And this year, a couple other ones producing fruit, and they're starting to lean a little bit too. So, I don't know, maybe.
Those two trees out there that are one beside the tomato plant, they're Asian kiwis. And they just haven't done well here. They freeze to the ground every year. So that's all the growth from this season. I actually found out that I like American persimmons quite a bit better than Asian persimmons. Yes, you have to wait. They're astringent if they're not ripe. But when they're ripe, they're more like rich pudding. And some people, for some reason, don't like soft things, but people eat pudding, but they don't like a fruit that's like pudding for some reason. Nonetheless, I find that the flavor of the American persimmon when it's actually ripe is more intense and more sweet. It's like a good watermelon compared to a watermelon that somebody else grew. It's just like more persimmony. You have to wait, and I like them for two reasons. Well, it's really easy to get the fruit out of the skin because you just take a spoon and it's not like really fibrous, so it just comes out really easy. If you ripen up an Asian persimmon, it's a little bit fibrous in there, and it's just difficult to separate the skin, and you know, you get it all over your hands, and anyhow, that's just kind of how it goes. So I do like the Asian persimmons, and I would probably like them more if I had easier luck growing them here. So kind of the way my life is going is stop fighting and go with what works. So plant something that you don't have to struggle with, because you know, you've got so many other things going on. Why not just spend some time on something that works for you in your area? We tried it, you know, and I'm not going to take them out right yet. I still have some hope, but I'm not going to, you know, count on it for my sustenance. And we still have the greenhouse. I got some figs started in pots, and they got out of the pots as they do. And so we get, you know, a greenhouse fig is actually a pretty good way to go, because we've had figs for 2 months now.
Yeah.
Not super big, but, and they'll even, you know, they'll drop a fig and they'll dry here because the greenhouse is pretty warm. But you can tell when they're ripe, they get a little squishy. They start to hang.
What kind are these?
All kinds. There's some of the Desert King, like Paul grows. And we still have our lemon tree over here. It's, you know, it's just sort of hanging on. We just haven't given it a lot of love lately. But it's still doing its thing, and you can see from the top of the greenhouse over here, it's growing for it. It's trying to produce some figs out there, so that's all this season's growth. We had it cut way back, or all of them way back, because we have to, you know, start all of our garden plants and stuff inside there.
Right.
So they're pretty vigorous.
I just broke on through.
Yep. Here's a Bosque pear. Looks like we're gonna get two here. This here tree was a little bit stunted when I planted it, so it's a little bit back from what some of the other Bosque pears. I got two other Bosque pears, and we can look at those a little bit later. Peppers, this is our row of peppers, and because these were in the shade, I think they were just reaching for the sun, so that's why they're so tall. This is it's a weed, so it's wild lettuce. And sometimes if I'm in pain or something like that, I've taken regular lettuce and I blend up 2 heads of lettuce in the blender and drink it, and it's quite muscle relaxing. There's actually like natural morphine essentially in lettuce. Like, I generally don't eat lettuce in the daytime because then I want to go take a nap because it's so relaxing to me. I'm more sensitive than other people would be. But this is even stronger. It has more bitters in it. So you can take this and blend it up if you're in pain or having muscle spasms, and you'll sleep better than you have in months, kind of a deal. So I like a few of them around, and you can make it more palatable by blending it with lemon. Things sour helps to cover up some of the bitters. But then you can get used to the bitter. Let's say if you're in pain, well, a little bit of bitter is better than the pain you're in, so you just deal with it. You know, sometimes we eat things that aren't super pleasant just because of how they help us. So these here have been 2 years. These are Jupiter grapes. They're semi-seedless. I wouldn't say that they're seedless per se, but the seeds are actually soft in them. Now they're really disease resistant, they're really cold hardy, and they produce a thin-skinned grape. These are kind of small. We haven't really mulched here, so you know the soil's a little bit harder for them than some of the other places. We've got some other, have probably 100 grapevines now, something like that. And this is a melon that came up from seed. Sometimes we grew melons here last year, and sometimes you just let things go if they're not really bothering you. And so that's what's going on here. We start pretty much all of our plants from seed. These are the ones we started this spring, different varieties. This is a nectarine tree, and it seems to be pretty disease resistant. We do have some problems with some of our peach trees. They get peach leaf curl just because we're really moist here. You know, we get a lot of rain in the spring, and peaches don't really like that. They like dry and stuff. So, but this one hasn't really had any leaf curl or anything like that. And it's, you know, it's set quite a bit of fruit here. I don't know if you can see over there. Back there we've got a gooseberry, and this is the first year we've had gooseberries. The bush grows a lot, doesn't produce too much fruit. It's kind of an interesting flavor. The skin is kind of tough, but the flavor, I would say, it tastes like pink lemonade, like sweetened pink lemonade. You know, you chew into it and it's like sweet and sour, kind of chewy, but good, you know. I haven't had enough to blend them, you know, and the ones that I was waiting to ripen, the birds tried to eat, so some of them I had to eat damaged. Apple trees. This is a Gala. It's got one apple on it, so this will be the first year that we've got anything off of it. And I've summer pruned it a bit. I planted a lot of standard rootstocks, so that's one reason why my apple trees are taking a long time to produce. And they're pretty vigorous. So, I mean, you know, this is like half a season's worth of growth. I pruned it off here earlier this season, middle season. And I find like apple trees, if you don't have any fruit on them, it doesn't really hurt to prune them. You know, you're not going to cut your fruit off. So if it's getting out of its space that you want it to get into, then go ahead and prune it a little bit. This is a serviceberry, and they are really good. I think so. They're just a different really good, like a unique really good. They're not super sweet, but they taste like, say, maybe an apple mixed with an almond, in a way. And they're so good that if I don't get them, I don't get them because the birds come and clean them off. Yeah, they're really good.
Now, are those berries dried or?
Well, these are the ones that didn't get pollinated very good. So these are small. These are not even edible, really. I mean, yeah, you could probably eat them, but what's the point? The berries that are good are about this size. And they're like a blueberry, but actually they're sweeter than a blueberry. And if I had to choose between the two, yeah, it's a toss-up because you like different things about different things. But being that they're unique, they're early season, the blueberries are ripe here about now. So you've got to have plants that produce for you at different times. You can't eat all your fruit in the fall, and you can't fast until fall either. So you got to have stuff, and it's nice because you just move on with the seasons. It's like, okay, I had that. Well, what's next? Sometimes you actually get tired of stuff. You eat it for a while. Like when cucumber season came on, I was like, man, just eating cucumbers like crazy. I'm still eating cucumbers like crazy. But at some point, you're like, I've had enough, let's move on. So then the apples start coming on and so forth. And it's all good. Let me shut this sprinkler off. So I can tell you a little bit about the sprinklers that I make up. I don't have a lot of water pressure right now because my well pump is tired. So I can't water with a regular type of a sprinkler system. And I make these bases out of stainless steel because I was having rust problems and my nozzles would get clogged. And then this is copper tubing, and I use silver solder and solder the ends on it and make it any length I want. You buy them in 20-foot sticks and just cut them and fit it. And these sprinklers they're Toro sprinklers. There's different size nozzles. There's a white and a yellow one, and I find the combination between the two is pretty good for me. Doesn't put out a lot of water, but I can run my sprinkler for 24 hours and I can run a few more sprinklers. I don't have enough power or enough pressure to run a Rainbird. It just sits there and doesn't even do anything. So I have to figure out something that works for me. And you can, if you look at the water line here, you can see how far so it goes quite a way if I don't run too many of them. And see, this white one has a really tiny orifice in it, and I need a certain amount of pressure to actually make it spin. So sometimes if I flip it upside down, it spins a little bit easier. And generally, well, the reason why I have the two different types of sprinkler heads there is because one shoots a little farther and the other one is a fill-in. So I find that it waters pretty even. Especially if I flip that upside down, then it waters here. There's really no dry spots. And it's handy because I can move it wherever I want to, and you know, this is something I do in the morning and the evening. I just move it every 12 hours, something like that. So this is one of my favorite herbs. It's called holy basil or tulsi, and it's not a true basil. It reminds me of basil. It's actually a perennial, but it's not a perennial here. So it's a woody plant, but it gets too cold, so it won't live through the winter, but it lives a lot longer than your regular basil. And it's an adaptogen, so an adaptogen herb helps our body, say it builds its immune system if it needs built, it brings our immune system down, it just helps us, gives us whatever we need, it helps with mental clarity, it helps with a lot of different things, and it's tasty. Some people say it's a mix with rosemary and clove and basil, and it tastes a little bit medicine-y to me, but it's just like a feel-good kind of a thing, you know, especially blended with cucumbers and stuff like that. It's kind of a nice, you know, your regular basil for me is too much basil. It's just like too concentrated of a flavor for me to enjoy. I mean, you can use a little bit of it, but I like this better. And I don't plant it anymore. You just let it go to seed and it'll plant itself. So it's something that you just sort of get established and just let it do its thing. And if you don't like it there, you can move it, or, you know, they come up wherever the wind blows them around in the fall. And so it's kind of, in a way, it's exciting because you never know what's going to come up where. It's like, oh, what's coming up here? Oh, that's what I want. So it's search around kind of a deal. So pear trees have a habit of vertical growth, and a little bit difficult to manage. I've tied branches down. A vertical branch doesn't like to produce fruit. So to get a branch to produce fruit, you need more of a horizontal branch. There's a hormone in trees, it's called auxin, and it like this here is a fruiting bud. Hopefully next year it will produce fruit. And you can see that, say, this is not a fruiting bud, this is a branch. And so either you prune it off or it turns into a tree. So, and I don't want my trees any taller than I can reach because I don't feel the need to climb ladders, and, you know, I'd rather have more trees. So it takes a bit of time to sort of tie your branches down and train them. They say with pear trees you don't want to go below 45. Well, yeah, but it's difficult, you know, like some of these I've tied down and they're back up to vertical again. They just do that.
And you got, what, melons or something growing underneath your tree?
That's squash. And the squash, we have generally better luck if we don't plant it. You just throw an old squash down there and it comes up whenever it's ready.
I recognize this. Got onions here.
Yeah.
Seed.
Yeah. So
That's what all of my onions look like right now.
you don't have any that didn't produce seed?
No, they all.
Well, it's so
There's some
hot
that
and
got
dry
seed
there.
here, yeah.
Yeah, so they're thinking, if I don't make seed this year, I'm not going to make it, probably.
Maybe. I have just rows of them, just these big poop balls. I just cut them off and throw them out in the backyard.
Well, if you let them, it's really not going to affect the the onion itself, whether you cut it off or not, because now you have a hard center through your onion. So when you go to harvest that onion and eat it, you just slice into that center and you pull out that hard center and you slice up your onion the way you would normally would. If you leave some of those heads in the fall, around September, they'll make little black seeds in them. You sprinkle those little black seeds out on the soil and water them, and you'll get onions.
That's what I'm doing in my backyard.
Okay.
So when the heads open up a little bit more than this, and you start seeing where the seeds are about ready to fall out, I put it in a Ziploc, chop it off, all the way down the road, take those and just start throwing them in the backyard.
Good, good. Peach tree, we've had some troubles with it. When I first started pruning it, I let it grow tall and I thought that was the deal. But the problem with peaches is they don't all ripen at the same time, and you've got to check. Otherwise, they'll fall off and hit the ground, and they don't look very good. They're kind of hard to eat when they're all falling apart because they're soft. So I like to be able to, reach the peaches. And we've let a few peaches come up from seed. So we'll see what happens with that. This plant right here is lemon balm or Melissa. And you can do a little research on the web about it. It is kind of calming for your nerves and blends great into like cucumber soup and things like that. You just pick these larger leaves like that. It's not necessarily invasive. It looks like it's in the mint family because it has the square stalk. Your nettles are actually in the mint family too. And what it does is it makes seeds and spreads plants around. But if you get them when they're small, it's not that big of a deal. But if you let it get this big, it's probably a good 2-foot hole deep. You're gonna have to dig to get it out, and you may not even get it because it's pretty resilient. So it's something good for our area. And if you don't use too much, it actually has a good flavor. If you use too much, it's like, you made mint tea with like 6 cups of mint. It's just too much. So.
Have you ever, I think the wife uses the essential oils. I think lemon balm is one of the big ones.
And it's also called Melissa. They'll sell it as Melissa as well. Yeah, and it's good. It's a good thing. And if you can grow it, you don't have to buy the oil. I mean, the oil has its uses because you can put it on your skin. But the nice thing about being able to grow something is you can have both. You can't have the leaf if you don't have the leaf. And you can't have it fresh if you don't grow it yourself, because you're not going to be able to buy it. This plant here is a wild type of arugula. It's my favorite arugula. This one just came up from seed here. We don't really plant it anymore. And you should probably taste it. It's a little bit... I'll pull a leaf so you guys can see what it looks like. Here we go. So it's nice and strong. It's if you're doing a salad or what have you, it adds that little zing to it. And arugula is just like a super nutritious plant. It doesn't get never get aphids on arugula. It just doesn't happen. So especially the more wild varieties. Cabbage. I harvested most of the cabbage this season. There's just a few of them left. We're starting our fall cabbages now. And we're mulching this area. I had nettles in here probably when you were here last time. They grew about 15 feet tall. The nettles weren't the problem. It was kind of a problem because it was just the wrong place for nettles. I mean, you have trouble picking peaches when you're getting eaten up by nettles, you know. So, and I had, we've got bindweed problems or morning glory, and I wanted to be able to deal with that, and you can't weed out morning glory if you've got to fight with nettles. So I know where the nettles are, I can get more. I just haven't found a good place for them. Yeah, I haven't found a good place to put them yet. And I have other things I'm focusing on right now. So I need to get my new well pump in, and I've still got, you know, probably 20 or 30 fruit trees I need to plant out. And just trying to babysit those. So this tree, where did I get it? I got it from Washington. It was like a local nursery, but I ordered it, and it was up in Wenatchee. And this one, like the same day it came, I planted it. And I think that definitely helps, especially with a bare root tree. Things lose vigor if you don't take care of them. Even though you've planted them 2 to 3 weeks later, they're just not the same tree as they could have been because they've been stressed out. And that's kind of what happened with that tree over there. That tree I planted a year before this tree, and you can see the difference. I don't know if it was just because it was a different nursery or if it was how it was managed, but definitely. And this one, the other Bosque pear tree over there, I think it had a little bit more time between when I got it and when I planted it. So definitely vigorous Bosque pears I like really well, and I'm pretty happy that we're gonna get some fruit here. And definitely, you know, I've pruned it a bit. It takes some management. It would obviously be all straight up and down if I didn't pull the branches down. Like that Bosque pear tree over there, the first big one that I showed you, I probably had 10 hours into tying its branches down. So, and then you need to take the strings off because they'll kind of cut into the branches, you know, within a year. They say about, you know, 3 to 4 months, it's enough. And I'm say, you know, so I just, sometimes I'll hook a weight on it to pull the branch down. Otherwise, you're just gonna need to prune it off because it's gonna go straight up and you're not gonna get any fruit on it. So, okra, just planted it out. I like okra. This is just really not the climate for okra. We haven't really had good success outside. My parents have pretty good success inside a greenhouse because it likes humidity, and it's just kind of dry here. You know, in Georgia it does really great. We used to live in Nebraska, and it would do, I mean, great. You know, just because there's so much more moisture in the air than we have here. The humidity is so low. It just doesn't. It's like trying to grow a cucumber in the desert without any water. You just don't get any cucumbers. Yeah, the plant might live, maybe. This is a Rainier cherry. Got like maybe 5 cherries off of it this year, and just amazing. This is pretty, you know, we've really worked with the soil here and richened it up. And the fruit was really watery. The skin was like thin, like cellophane thin, and just really rich cherry, and, you know, just melt in your mouth kind of cherry. Normally cherries, it wasn't like a mushy cherry. It was like a crunchy cherry in a way, but yeah, difficult to explain. So I'm excited to see what we get next year. And cherry trees will grow 100 feet tall. I've seen them, you know, wild cherry trees growing in the Blue Mountains. the trunk is about this big around and they're 100 feet tall and all the cherries are at 100 feet. So you can't really pick very many of those. I've picked a few. I haven't climbed up there, but sometimes there's a few branches that you can kind of reach. So you've got to manage your fruit trees if you're going to be able to pick your fruit. So, I mean, yeah, it could take up the whole backyard if you wanted it to. Some people want that, that's okay. It's just whatever you want, you know. So we're growing some cucumbers on the ground here. And they're time to pick. They get big, but a cucumber like this, it gets a little bit larger. It's great to make water. So you're making a smoothie or a soup or something in your blender. You don't even add water. You just throw a bunch of cucumbers in there, and now you have your good soup base. And then you can add whatever else it is that you want to it, your onions, your garlic, your avocado, and cream it up, and you know, like arugula and holy basil and lemon balm and whatever you want. Throw some cabbage in there. I may have mentioned this last time. This is sea kale. It's not a kale. It actually was found growing by the ocean, so it can probably grow in nearly straight seawater. And the leaves are a little bit thicker than your regular kale that you're used to. Kind of more body. As the season goes on, they get a little bit more bitter. They're definitely good and nutritious. The seeds, this is actually the seed. It doesn't open up. You just plant that whole thing. This is a early Fuji, this apple tree here. This is more like a summer apple. It is called a Ruby Mac.
Oh, what?
It's a cross between I don't know, Ruby, anyhow, it's called Ruby Mac. So Macintosh crossed with another apple. I was looking for a Macintosh because my wife likes a Macintosh, and I found this one, and I don't know if you've ever eaten a Macintosh. It's kind of interesting. It's a soft apple. They don't keep very well, but they have like little red strings inside of them. Kind of weird. But it's more of an East Coast apple. For some reason, East Coast people grow different apples than West Coast people eat, and I don't, or grow, and I am not sure exactly why. Yeah. So it grows here, and definitely a good producer. We've had apples on it 3 years. This is an Aztec Fuji. It's producing just a few apples. We had some good apples off of it last season. So of your Fujis, your Aztec is a lot better than your early Fuji. They're more flavorful. I don't really like Fuji so much. I just, you know, the more variety the better. Some people like the Fujis because they're hard and crunchy. I like actually I prefer Red Delicious. Some people don't like Red Delicious because they only get the Red Delicious that have been in the supermarket for 6 months. And they go, oh, this is not good. But if you've ever had a Red Delicious right off of the tree when it's ripe, it's amazing. It tastes like cinnamon. Yeah, the skin is a little thicker than some other, but the flesh is juicy and it's not hard. I mean, sometimes like you bite into a Fuji and it'll actually peel your gums off because it's so hard. You know, you almost have to either cut it with a knife or just take small bites. Haven't got any apples off of this yet. It's a Mutsu. So Paul has this variety. Maybe you've even tasted the Mutsu.
Probably.
So here's another Asian persimmon. You can see that it froze to the ground. It grew that much last season, and this year just didn't make it. So, and we can come around here, bamboo. This is a clumping bamboo. It's more like a grass, really. Carrot going to seed. Broccoli. Broccoli seed. We just put up these trellises this year, and I think I like the T-post idea better than what I was doing with my melon tunnel. It seems enough stability with the T-post if you tie it up high enough that, you know, if you can still hang some weight on it and it's still not going to sag on you because there's enough stability there. So, and then it leaves the center open for you. So, you know, it probably will take quite a few more T-posts. So, you know, you're going to get a little more money into T-posts, but it's all right. And it allows you to set up shorter sections if you just want a little section here and there. It's kind of fun to have the hoop shape to hang your cucumbers off of. And what I like, the way I like to set things up nowadays is give yourself some space.
Up off the ground.
Give yourself some space. You're not gonna rust your cattle panel out with your sprinkler, your watering, your mulch. It gives you room to mulch in the future, or compost, or whatever, or to weed. So it's less battles. You know, set your garden up so you're having less battles. Kale, 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 kale. It grows. So red kale, it's really winter hardy. It can go through all winter and it just loves it. Doesn't even affect it. So there's different kales that are more hardy and less hardy. Your dino kale is a cross between a cabbage. Is not going to make it through the winter. Not here. So, and we had peas that were 6 foot tall here. And they're, you know, we ate peas and we're done with peas, and so they're done with us. And more cucumbers, lettuce going to seed. Yeah, cucumbers. And this is just 2 pieces of rebar in the ground with some conduit and some conduit corners and some poly mesh hung between them. So it's something easy and simple to put up if you want a trellis and you don't want to pick your cucumbers off the ground. Tomato cages, this is what we were running out back, and we're not running tomato cages out back anymore. I find that you can only run tomato cages with good results one season in one spot, because something about the tomato, it affects the soil. The first year you get good tomatoes. The second year you get so-so tomatoes. By the third year the plants are just not vigorous. You can grow other things there and they're like crazy vigorous. So I think the way that I would run tomato cages is I like the T-post. It's simple. I put the cage off the ground so I can plant the plant and deal with whatever I need to deal with. Generally, you're not hanging fruit down there anyway. And it takes a long time to get that established to start hanging some fruit. And so if we got probably 8 to 9 feet where we can hang tomatoes if we need to. I think for the money though, if you're gonna build remesh cages, instead of buying the 7.5 foot, which is like $400 a roll, buy the 5 foot, and just put the cage up higher off the ground. Most people aren't gonna grow 8-foot tomatoes in our climate. And, unless your soil is really good, still we may not get it. And another thing is, by the time your fruit gets up there, you're not gonna get it ripe anyway. So.
Or reach it.
Well, yeah. It's not so bad with a tomato and a ladder, because, you can see it and you go and you pick your tomatoes. But sure. Yeah, the problem is if you only run your tomatoes this tall, you get a mess. So you gotta have something, you gotta sort of let them go a bit. You can't really let them down like you can do on a string, but you can't really run strings out in the sunlight, because the sun will just burn the tomatoes. They need shade. And we tried the greenhouse method where they would run a single stalk. It's a lot of work. It doesn't give us good quality fruit out in the sun because the sun's too harsh. It'll split the tomatoes. The problem is it dries the skin out and the skin will crack on you. But let's say you just let your tomatoes run out on the ground. Your fruit that you find that's under the shade of those leaves that you've let on the ground, it's all soft and supple and it's stretchy and you don't get any cracks. The problem is you get a tomato this big, by the time it's finally ripe, now it's rotten and you didn't get it. So it helps to have something where you can see it. If you got to dig through a plant that's, this wide and this tall, good luck. Zucchini. This is a weed, but it's a pretty tasty weed. I'll use it now and again. It's called sorrel. So it has a nice sour to it. So if you're eating a salad and you don't have any lemon, you can throw one of those in. You may not want to eat a lot of it because it's high in oxalic acid, but it's, another plant that we can have. We planted these cucumbers a bit late. They were in pots a little bit long, so they're recovering. We don't have quite enough mulch here, and this is a fairly deserty place for our garden. So it gets quite hot, and everything's a little bit stressed out here. So, and plus we're having a little bit of a water issue, but they're producing some fruit for us and doing all right. And what I found with the tomatoes is it's easier to if you're gonna run cages, it's easier to let the tomatoes run outside the cage than trying to keep them in the cage. So then, these are called tuit ties. So they're a little stretchy tie. I get them in like a big old bag, and you put them on your wrist, and then when you want to use them, there's many ways to use them, but it's pretty simple. Right. You just tie them on there and it holds things up. So, and as you go, you can take some off the bottom and keep on going, where you don't need any. So this cherry tree, yeah, it's in the shade. I planted it at the same time as another cherry tree over there. But I planted it in the fall and it froze to the ground. And so it's been really stunted. And I think it's probably 3 to 4 years old, something like that. But you know, the mulberry tree blocks the sun, and I don't know exactly what's going on, but it seems like it's finally starting to get a little bit more vigorous. Strawberries, we transplanted some. I need to get some more water here. They're not super happy. These were winter cabbages, or they're more of a hardy cabbage, so they're not juicy like your regular green cabbages. This is a peach, so it's a peach that came from seed. We just threw some compost out there a few years ago and haven't got really too many peaches off of it yet. So obviously it's not peach season yet. But, you know, it's kind of growing in a crazy manner. I was trying to get out of under the mulberry trees, so it's kind of growing sideways. And I cleaned up the mulberry tree here recently and pruned off its lower branches. But this spring it was really naked. I mean, it looked like it was dead. They grow a lot. And you've got to do that, otherwise you're gonna have a real mess. It's essentially, once you start pruning a tree, you have to prune a tree. So these are, I think I had these grapes, but they were all on the ground last time you were here. And this year I built a trellis for them, and they grow a lot. So my last grapevine is right here. And so they've grown that much out. This particular grapevine has filled in that much space. They're setting a few grapes. Here's the ones with more color. I don't know if you can get in here. You wanna?
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
And these I planted in the spring, and I planted those in the fall. So I planted these grapes in the spring, and the soil's different here too, so it's not really fair. But you can see they look pretty good. When they're ripe, they're so good I dream about grapes all day until I get home. So I've never had any more grapes than I can eat, so I'm excited that maybe I might have more grapes than I can eat. But then I can eat a lot of grapes, so I mean, I can eat, 5 pounds of grapes when I come home from work. So, and then other people like them, but they don't want to plant them, so they come over and help themselves. Planted onions along here, and this was a lettuce bed where I just threw lettuce out for a few years. Asparagus is pretty amazing when it's on. When you get it at the right time, it's just juicy and sweet. It's kind of like honey. Just, you break it like at Paul's place, it just drips. This is watercress, or land cress, I guess you'd call it. So it's reminiscent of arugula. It's a little bit spicy. Let me get a full leaf so you can see what it looks like. So it's something that comes up, you know. And this is where we had grown tomatoes, but the soil was so sick from growing tomatoes, I decided to plant Austrian winter peas. And this didn't get quite enough water on this side. The other side's a little bit taller. But you can see that, I mean, I haven't ever seen Austrian winter peas that tall. Generally, you know, you see them out in the farmer's field and they might be this tall, something like that. So, I think the soil's still good. It's just needed a little
Break from tomatoes.
Yeah. And these watermelons came up from seed. So there are biggest ones. There's a few different, you know, sometimes we just throw some old watermelons out or compost or something. And so sometimes you let things start on their own and they do pretty good. This is the same type of sprinkler, only it's just a little bit shorter for watering, you know, plants that I don't need to water the whole plant. I just want to get the water in the root zone. Cantaloupe style melons. And we planted some peppers in the middle. So, you know, you can run melons and peppers together, you know, things that aren't really gonna fight too much. The problem is you gotta check your plants because they want to climb. So they'll get tangled into your cages for your pepper plants. But we got some melons forming here. It's actually amazing how much these Jupiter grapes grow. Jupiter?
It's a nice little wall.
Yeah.
Your privacy fence.
Yep. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And they're so easy to start. I mean, you can probably just cut some cuttings in the spring and plant them in the ground. There's other ways to do it too. You can put them on a heat mat after you cut them, and they'll stimulate the area on the vine that you want root growth. You could put them in sand or perlite or something like that. But you like cover them up, you put them in a cold place, but you heat up the root zone and they'll actually grow roots easily. Other way is you just take your chances. But you know, you get maybe 30% success on taking your chances. So we have landscape fabric here because we have such a bindweed problem and just cannot keep up with it, you know. So we put landscape fabric down to deal with the bindweed, and we get so hot out here that it kind of scorches the tomatoes because the black it's even hotter, you know. So I put this poly up here to help a little bit. You can see the leaves are sort of scorched from the extra heat. But we're getting good tomatoes. They're coming. And these are my design of trellises. I came up with the idea last year. We've had a few ripe tomatoes, not too many. I picked a green ripe tomato last night. It was pretty good. So if you'd like to see how the trellises are made, backside might be a better way to see. It's a cattle panel on top, and this is chain link fence tubing, and these are T-clamps. T-clamps. It's about, this here is 2 foot. That one on that far end, we can go look at it, is 3 foot. The short leg is 3 foot. This is 2 foot here. This is 4 foot here on this particular trellis. And for the amount of time that you get into managing your tomatoes, so far I'm pretty pleased with this, because you get them up on it and then you pretty much just have to sort of manhandle them a little bit to get them to lay on the cage, versus with a tomato cage, you gotta pretty much tie them up or stuff them in or whatever. So you can see some of the tomatoes here, the size they're getting. Different tomatoes grow differently. So this one here, these are 5 foot, and these are 3 foot. So this is a foot taller. I mean, you know, you can build them any way you want. So it takes me about a day to build one, something like that. Black raspberries, blackberries. These are thornless blackberry. They have set quite a lot of fruit. You kind of got to come out and get them whenever. I don't know if that's ripe yet. I don't know if this is ripe yet. You might want to taste. It's not ripe?
It's not ripe.
No? Okay. This one's ripe. Here we go.
No.
That one?
It's not ripe.
That one's not ripe?
Oh, that one might be ripe.
Here. Try that one.
That's it.
Generally,
Still good.
for a blackberry, it needs to not be shiny anymore. You see how this is a
Right.
little bit flat black? A little sweet and sour flavor. Yeah. So these are watermelons, and I had really good luck last year, or success, growing watermelons. They're getting some size to them this year. And I find in our area, the only way I get watermelons is with black landscape fabric. They have to have the heat. And that heat that they get actually encourages them to make blossoms. If I grow on mulch, I get nothing.
Really?
Or generally nothing, you know. So something about that heat that they need. You know, like in Hermiston where they grow watermelons, it's desert. You probably have super good luck growing watermelons right on the sand.
Yep. Throw a couple seeds out there and you get a huge plant.
Right. Yeah. But we have, I think our nights may be a little bit cooler than yours, and
We're a little bit different climate than us. Not by much.
so I've got a little heavy on the ocean salt for micro minerals in this area. Lost a plant and a half, so it's trying to recover, but it's a learning process. Here's some more watermelons. And I kind of have a deal with my neighbor. I kind of try and take care of his edge over there. He allows me to put landscape fabric on his property. And so that helps me out. And this is an apple tree that came from seed. It's probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 years old. Something like that. There's actually 3 trees here. This tree produces apples every other year. I think it's a Fuji cross with pollinator. I think the birds planted it for me. And you can kind of see how heavy it was hung last year, and it bent all the branches down. But I need to shorten this one up. It looks like we might have 1 apple off of this year, 2, 3, something like that. So this will be the first year that this particular tree has produced anything. They're pretty hard, you know, they're not super sweet, but they're an apple. Horseradish. This is a Sweet 16 apple. Haven't seen any apples off of it yet. I think we need a little more mulch and maybe a little more time, a little more water. It's a Bing cherry. We got a few Bing cherries off of it this year. I think Bing cherries aren't like the most healthy variety of cherry out there. They definitely have their problems. They get a little bit of fungal issues. So haven't you know, got everything dialed in yet, but it's just a kind of a learning curve. Apricot tree, only had 1 fruit off of it. It was good. But we had a cold snap right when it was blooming. So apple tree back there, that was a seedling. It produces pretty good apples. They're small, they're fairly soft. Actually, I can't say that it's a seedling or not because it was here when we bought the property. That cherry tree is a seedling. It's like a pie cherry. They're real small. And yeah, I don't know how much longer it's gonna stay there. I might have to take a vacation. I'm not sure. I kind of like it. It gives me a little bit of privacy in that space. But I've got, you know, these are seedling cherries, and I need to get them out of there. And got a plum that I let live, and it's not so tasty. And yeah, I just need to clear space there. These are Honeycrisp apples. I haven't actually eaten a Honeycrisp that I like. But Honeycrisps do grow crazy big sometimes. And don't know if this is the right spot for them. My neighbor, he grows Honeycrisps, and they put netting over their whole orchard to shade them from the sun because they get sunburnt. So this is New Zealand spinach. I think it's more nutritious than spinach. It's a lot better. And it's a perennial in New Zealand, but here it's an annual. It has a different growing characteristic. These here are the seeds. So there are little hard rocks. You can't even hardly squish them, especially when they're dry. And you throw it on the ground, and it grows New Zealand spinach next year. So really easy to maintain. We have some strawberries there. These here are peach and plum and apple and whatever that some of them I planted on purpose. I was planning on transplanting them. I have not pruned anything here. So this is what peach and nectarine trees do if you do nothing besides plant them and water them occasionally. In case you wanted to know. The interesting thing is you're not going to break branches because everything's more flexible when you don't prune them. It's kind of a shaded spot here, so things don't do very well. At some point when I get my other trees taken care of that I need to plant, these will come out. Either they'll be transplanted or they'll just come out. But it's kind of nice to have a little bit of shade here. I just don't think it's a good idea to plant things close to the house overall.
I'm always worried about the roots.
Yeah. I don't. We had goji berries planted right here, and we had goji berries coming up through the wooden floor in our house. So we decided, yeah, that's enough goji berries there.
Oh, your cactus.
Cactus is still alive. We moved it, probably from last time you were here.
Yeah, it was like maybe over there more.
Yep. We put a little cage around it to protect ourselves from it. But it's still doing its thing. If you need a desert cactus, take a petal and plant it in the soil, it'll grow.
Oh, I'm gonna do that.
You can put it to catch intruders. Ah!
Put it right around my kale plants to keep the bunnies away from them.
There you go. So this is our flower garden.
What kind of tree is this?
This is a weeping pussy willow. Just thinking about making little pink fluffy things. It does take a lot of work. It's pretty vigorous and it grows all the branches in the wrong places. So every 2 weeks, pretty much, you need to prune it. I recently pruned it, but it continues. When it gets too many shoots, it's not pretty anymore. So. This is crocosmia. It's done though. It has red blossom. We have yellow crocosmias. Now there's one blossom right there. You can kind of see what they look like. This is kind of our little desert garden spot. I haven't really tried any of this plant yet, but it's a desert plant. It's a Ephedra. Or Mormon tea. I chewed on a little bit. I don't notice anything from it. But it's a stimulant. but it's definitely a desert plant. It grows in Utah and dry places. This is Angelica. People generally use the root for that as like an herb. And we have grapes that I planted here. They're still on the ground, but at some point I'm going to build some sort of a trellis for them. And
Are you still doing the compost tea?
haven't made any since you were here last, I think. Just kind of got busy doing other things.
Life happens.
Yep. So, kind of want to get back to that, but I kind of need to get caught up on some other things first. So I don't really have any space in my garage right now.
That was very cool.
That's
I
another.
really like the trellis stuff. I'm doing grapes for a wall so I don't have to buy a fence. I like that.
It's a, you know, it's a bit of work to put up a fence to hang your grapes on. You know, there's a bunch of different ideas for fences, and like the wire fence that I put out by the watermelons on the south edge of my property. I use high tensile wire, and there's a special way I make it, and I put a couple of stakes in the ground, and I tie into those, so one supports the other stake in the ground, and then I tie into that, and then I run my guy wire off of that, and I run two guy wires off of that, because
Like what we just walked through at the
Yep.
end of the...
yes. So the metal T-post isn't strong enough to tighten the strainers up on the trellis without something supporting it in the middle. It's just like, it'll just bend. So I run two supports, and your ground holds the bottom, so you run in the middle and you run it towards the top, somewhere there, so it's kind of all happy. The problem I have found with the amount of watering I have to do is wood just doesn't work for me here. It rots out. I get maybe 3 years and it's done. And it's hard enough to put it up the first time. And I'm not going to use treated lumber because I don't want that. So the metal T-post seems to be the ticket for me. So I haven't really seen anybody that runs 10-foot T-posts and grapes on them straight up. I've seen people that will run their grapes about this high and about 20 feet wide. Those same types of grapes, and they'll prune their grapes until they only have 2 bunches of grapes or something like that on each plant, and the grapes can be this big. So, there's only so much vigor that a plant has to produce fruit. It's just however you want to grow it. Would you rather have more bunches and smaller, or one large bunch? You pretty much end up with the same. It's all a learning process. I don't know if leaving that many branches or on the vines is a good idea yet. One of the problems I had last year, I pruned all the branches off and the grapes didn't ripen up evenly. The ones that I didn't prune at all, they were sweeter. So you need a certain amount of vine to produce sweet fruit. That's how you get the sugar. The leaves, they're like solar panels. So there's some combination there, if you have too much shade, you might have disease or something like that because there's not enough airflow. Another problem is if you let the birds see your grapes, then you don't get any. So I do have netting, and I'll do that if I start seeing something going on, and I may have to do that on the ones that have less vines. It's just, we got to check in with ourselves, and it's the trial and success method. So what we find that works, do more of it. What we find that doesn't work, do less of it. And just, it's like a zigzag course, First we're going like this, not trying to find our way, and then as we get closer, we get dialed in. That's life, First we try things that don't work for us, and we're like, oh, that wasn't the way we wanted to go. So.
Well, that's all I have for this video. Bang around that bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos come out. Call us on the hotline if you have comments or questions and want to be featured in an upcoming video. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe. Check us out on the website, and we'll see you guys on the next one.